This is Skeptarchy. Welcome, everybody. I am one of your hosts, Eric. It is good to be back. I have been on a bit of a sabbatical, if you will.
All right, and I'm Cory.
And I'm Kevin.
And I'm Dell.
And we're just as quick to introduce ourselves as ever.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Things
Extremely.
don't change.
They never change.
Organized.
So, what do we want to talk about this evening?
I don't know. You said you had something to talk about, but Eric, Dell, y'all got any fun news?
I haven't been paying much attention to the media, per usual, but what do you guys know about the Facebook whistleblower? What can you tell me about that? Have any of you watched the interview or highlights of it or anything like that?
To the best of my knowledge, she didn't reveal anything that I didn't already kind of suspect.
Yeah, like I read an interview with her by the Washington Post, and just as I went through it, and she got to all of these different revelations. I'm like, really? We needed to be told this.
These are revelations at this point.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, you're just repeating what we've already known. There were a lot of cases in which her just complete and utter naivete showed through so severely. She was,
Wasn't she fairly high up in the company? Like, she's not just like a random tech, right? Like,
yeah, no, she was a director of a, what was it? It was like their social responsibility department or some utter nonsense phrase like that.
Did they install that after they helped commit genocide?
Yes. Yeah. But she had access to a lot of information, but she was just like, I never would have suspected that a company, or what was it? No, she said something along the lines of, I always figured that Facebook would do what's in the best interest of the people, and then I found out they just did what's in their own best interest. Like,
do you know how capitalism works?
A huge corporation didn't have the public good in mind. I don't know what to think, guys. My world is shattered.
Giant company worked solely for its own best interest. You don't say. I
Totally
never would have
away.
guessed. I'm like, seriously, how does someone get that far? Because she'd worked at other places. She'd worked at places like Yelp and Google. And I'm like, of course, big companies do what's in their best interest. How is this news? How are you just now realizing this? You have been in this industry for a decade and you don't realize that companies don't work in the people's best interest.
But they wouldn't have hired her if she wasn't naive, though. That was exactly what they were looking for, right? Was someone who, was totally willing. They were looking to hire someone that totally bought their narrative, right? To be their cheerleader.
I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Someone who wasn't quite jaded yet, fresh out of whatever public relations school with a rosy glasses.
Yeah, that doesn't explain why she got so far in her career without figuring it out, but it does explain why she got hired, I think, because that's exactly the kind of person you're looking for if you're Facebook, right?
Yeah, and then
it doesn't explain why 60 Minutes thought it was a story to reveal that capitalism
how it works
does capitalism.
Yeah.
Completely shattered my faith in multi-billion-dollar companies. And
I
thought they had me in mind.
Facebook, they set up this section of their staff around the 2020 election after what happened in the 2016 election, and then just dissolved it immediately after. This was very clearly, the whole thing was a fucking PR stunt / a little, maybe a little bit of protection from, regulators for the duration of the election. And then they just dropped her like a hot rock when it was done. And she has the audacity to be surprised by this? Ugh. I'm just like, honey, how are you this naive? How have you gotten this far in life being that naive? I do not understand.
Privileged people don't really know how the world works.
It's true. It's fucking true.
They don't.
We need to sit everyone down in front of Bo Burnham's How the World Works over and over again until they get it, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I do think, like, as sad as it is, because, like, we should have all realized this already, but, like, to a lot of people, especially, like, boomers, hearing it, the more people they hear it from, right, the more it can sink in for them. And also, like, having somebody really high up that presumably has a lot of credibility in their eyes, right? Like, it's all helpful for them to finally get it through their heads. I mean, it's not news to us, but, you know, the higher up people that are willing to talk about it, like, the better, I guess. I mean, eventually people, you know, the more people that try to blow the whistle on it, the more likely it is that something is done about it. I mean, I'm not saying it's likely, but it's more likely.
Right. One of the things that, like, it also sort of coincided with that day that WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram all went kaput.
So I have information on that. So
yeah.
So the 60 Minutes interview happened the night before the big Facebook outage. So here is what happened, and then I will go into my I don't think it's all that crazy theory. So what happened? What happened is that at first it looked like Facebook's entire DNS infrastructure went down. So for those who don't know, DNS is the system which takes names like Facebook.com and translates them into the numbers that the entire internet needs to work. So when DNS is not accessible, things stop working. Now, interestingly, the DNS that Facebook hosts internally is only for Facebook-specific content. It doesn't directly affect Instagram, WhatsApp, or Oculus VR, which were the other 3 services Facebook owns that went down. So that by itself doesn't explain what happened. What does is that not only did their DNS go down, technically it wasn't even the DNS that went down. There is a protocol that essentially runs the entire internet called BGP, or the Border Gateway Protocol. It's the protocol which tells all of the different entities on the internet where each other are. So basically it's, the internet is this giant web of interconnected points. Every point needs to know every other point it's connected to, and then those need to know the next points, and so on and so forth. And so every one of these endpoints has this big table of where it needs to direct all of these signals to. So something happened where the BGP routes for Facebook just got wiped. Now, that doesn't happen. And I'll tell you why. Because that breaks everything. That breaks your entire infrastructure out to the internet. So this doesn't happen because that is a very, I don't want to say guarded, but like very well maintained set of information. That just doesn't disappear from nothing. You either had to make the biggest fuck up in the history of fuck ups for that to happen, or you did it on purpose. And given how long Facebook has been around, how much money they have to put into their internet infrastructure, and how much expertise is behind the people who are making the decisions that would affect this, the big fuck up hypothesis doesn't work for me. So
do you think it could have been malicious, like from the outside or from the inside malicious?
I do not think it was malicious. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. But I also have to look at the timing and the fact that there is a fair amount of coincidence there. And then with the value of hindsight, look at what actually happened. What we saw happen in the day or two after the outage occurred was that all of the media attention was on the outage and very little of it was on the leak. And so because of this, I strongly believe at this point that Facebook intentionally engineered this outage to make it look like some big thing and divert the media attention away from the story of the leaker.
Well,
and it was purely a giant PR stunt.
if they fuck up, it also, like, it's sort of like a weaponized incompetence thing. It's like, how can we be the big baddies who are controlling everything? Look at us silly folks making mistakes. You know, I feel like it actually does contribute to less of a narrative of, like, yeah, this is like Big Brother, and more of a narrative like, oh, funny technology, haha. Like,
yeah. So, like, because of this, I honestly think that this was intentionally engineered from the inside, because honestly, from the perspective of anyone who's worked in corporate, like, computer networking for any amount of time, like, that is not a difficult thing to engineer. The systems, the backbones on which the internet runs are surprisingly fragile. It does not take much to fuck them up, but because of that, they are very careful about changes they make to this. Something like a BGP change that would end up wiping out all their routes, that would have gone through at least 4 or 5 different layers of approval before it got pushed out into production. And so this was either, like I said, the biggest fuck up in history, because, like, someone had to go in and delete the fucking routes for that to occur, or, more likely, in my opinion, was that they deleted them on purpose to make, or to shift the attention away. And, like, the fact that this happened the day after that interview came out, like, they were clearly looking to be like, how do we get public attention away from this before this goes huge? And they're like, shut everything down.
Yeah.
Because of how reliant the entirety of the social internet is on Facebook and Instagram, and to a lesser extent, WhatsApp. Like Oculus VR, that's kind of a newish thing. Not a lot of people have that yet, but those are the big three. And, like, Instagram especially is huge. Facebook is where fucking everyone goes to keep in contact with family. So it's a big deal when all of that goes down, and bound to push out whatever news story and bad publicity they might be getting. Anyways, that's why I think that happened.
As far as WhatsApp is concerned, like, that's it's globally used to keep track of family and, you know, stuff like that, and communicate with groups of people. And apparently, even in some universities, that's how students are handing in assignments and stuff. Yeah. So it's like pretty major loss to a lot of people, like, when these things are going down.
Mm-hmm. And like, Facebook and Instagram are both also global services. Yeah, like, a lot of countries ban them, but they're still used heavily in most of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I cannot say that your theory lacks reason.
Like, I realize, I'm saying shit that is, by definition, a conspiracy theory. Like, I am positing the idea that a group of people within the controlling few of Facebook conspired to bring the site down for a specific purpose. And if that makes me a crackpot conspiracy theorist, so be it. But, like, I do not think that it is out of... I do not think that it is out of the realm of reason for what could have happened. And, like, obviously, if something like that did happen, Facebook would be essentially, not only unlikely, but they just wouldn't say that. Like, they can attribute it to a dozen other different plausible hypotheses. Plausible deniability is a big fucking weapon.
Is what got wiped is because, like, I'm just not familiar with it, but, like, I've been part of, like, just as a IT user and, like, installing entirely new programs that I work in all day at companies I've worked at. Like, every time you roll out an update, like, I was the beta tester for it a lot of times as, like, a super user, right? And, like, occasionally things, but we only had one level of testing, and, like, occasionally something would get through, but, like, we'd roll it out on a Sunday night, or, like, whenever, for us, the lowest traffic time, we'd have to come in on a Sunday evening or afternoon. We'd roll it out after we'd beta tested it. Then we'd do a bunch of checks. We'd make sure everything was working. So just, like, I just can't imagine that they had something that was, like, is this the kind of thing that gets, when you just do, like, minor updates to Facebook, would you be touching this thing, the thing that got wiped?
No.
So, like,
so any
it doesn't make any
Facebook-
sense, because you would be, like, these that's just not how IT processes work. Like,
no,
yeah,
it's not.
occasionally
right.
something gets through your testing sometimes, but this just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. So, in what you're talking about with, like, user-level software updates, that's, okay, so I work currently in the development operations team in a mid-sized financial company. And every time we need to make any change that could potentially impact business operations for any amount of time, we typically wait until after business hours, preferably on, like, in the middle of the week. We don't want it to happen at the beginning of the week. We don't want it to happen at the end of the week. So we usually shoot for, like, middle, or if it's really impactful, we will wait until, like, after business hours on a Friday, and then that way we've got plenty of time to deal with any aftermath that comes through. So the fact that this happened on the morning of a Monday, okay? Now, I will be clear that Facebook is so within the world of development operations, there's a concept known as CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. And the idea there being that as the developers are making changes to the software, there are automated processes that once those changes get past a certain level of approval and get packaged into a release, that release is automatically built, pushed out to the endpoints, and things are just taken care of, right? Facebook will have a very high level of this because they're constantly making changes to their site, their algorithm, all the back-end shit. The thing is, what was changed has nothing to do with core site functionality and has everything to do with how their data center communicates with the rest of the internet. Okay?
Yeah.
So a border gateway. So say you have a couple of circles, right? You have the Facebook circle, which is pretty small, and then you have the rest of the internet circle, which is enormous. And there's, probably a few dozen connections between those because bandwidth requirements, but essentially there is one connection between those. This connection is managed by a number of protocols, a number of ways of sending information. And at the core of this is the Border Gateway Protocol. It is the thing that says, okay, our network, which is defined by this range of numbers, exists at this point, or at these points, depending how it's configured. And all of that is connected to whoever else they're connected to, whether that be their particular backbone service provider, or if they're directly connected to any other services, things like that, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, there is one core table that holds all of this information. It would go by kind of a jargony term. It's the source of truth. It is the one place that everything else references to know what the correct information is. It is this source of truth that was wiped. Once that was wiped, that change propagated throughout the rest of the internet so that no one could figure out how to get to that set of numbers that belongs to Facebook. That doesn't happen. You could make a change. Yeah. You could alter an endpoint. You could alter a path, but all the information would still be there. It may be wrong, but it would be there. What we found out on the day of the outage was the information was gone. There was not a single route that anyone could find to point to Facebook's IP addresses, which means because Facebook hosts their DNS internally, no one could get to their DNS. No one could figure out how to get to Facebook because the information simply wasn't there. You do not make that change by accident. You don't.
Well, it doesn't, that's not how any update rollout would work. It would never be it would be tweaking something. Right. It wouldn't be deleting giant chunks of data.
This is a router configuration to oversimplify it, right? But these are high-level router configurations, so they're probably stored in a change control repository where every time someone wants to make a change to this, They submit a request that is then approved by someone else, that is then merged into something else, and then that itself is approved, and then it's pushed to the next team, and that's approved, and so on and so forth, until finally they decide to actually make the change on the equipment and commit it to, the reality of the world, as it were. So the fact that something this big could have gotten through that many layers of verification and validation, I don't believe it. I just don't. So
yeah, it doesn't seem very plausible.
No, this, like, the most likely explanation to me for this happening is it was intentional. And I do not think, like, I cannot think of any major data breach in any of Facebook's history. They've been around for a while. I cannot think of, off the top of my head, any major data breach that they have, that has been released or reported in the last 10 years. If I'm missing one, it's entirely possible I'm missing one, but, like, I feel like if a Facebook data breach occurred, that would be big fucking news.
Yeah, like that's
like Twitch's entire fucking source code just got released and people knew right away, right? Yeah. This was, this is not something that just escapes people's memory. So Facebook has their network security on lock pretty well, I think. So I do not think that this was likely to have been an outside malicious attack. And with the possibilities of internal accident and outside malicious attack eliminated, all we have left is internal intentional action. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly enough reason, there's certainly enough motive there, given the events of, the few days before, to say that is certainly a plausible hypothesis. I cannot say anything with any amount of certainty. I do not have the information needed to say this with any amount of certainty, but this is the current hypothesis that I am convinced of. If someone has information to counter that hypothesis, I am absolutely willing to review it. That's just what I think right now.
Sounds feasible. Definitely. Yeah. If not highly possible.
And Facebook is evil, so they probably did.
Yeah. Indeed. Thanks for the explanation. It was very enlightening, because I've been very not online. Well, I mean, I'm a very online person, but I've been less plugged in than usual for the last week. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it did a pretty good job, because I actually didn't even hear about the Facebook whistleblower thing until I listened to the most recent episode of Cognitive Dissonance while I was working this morning. So I didn't even hear about it until a week ago, but obviously I heard a ton about the Facebook outage. I honestly didn't even really notice the Facebook outage. Like, I noticed that Facebook wasn't working on my phone, but my phone's been a piece of shit for a while, and I really need a new one. So I was like, whatever. And it wasn't, like, terribly distracting to me. And I'm, like, a very online person. So I found it interesting that I was like, oh, yeah, 6 hours without Facebook was, like, I barely noticed. But
yeah. So what was interesting is I saw a couple of screenshots the day of where, while the outage was still going on, people, did basic Google searches for things like Facebook news, looking for news related to Facebook. It took them until, I think it was item number 8 before they even saw one instance of the Facebook leak being reported. Everything else was either about the outage or like the entry for Facebook News, which is an actual thing Facebook offers, is their own news aggregator.
Right, their own little news service.
But, like, even after that, and they went down, for a few pages, like, after that one entry, for the next 3 or 4, it was right back to the outage. That was the thing that took over the news cycle. As we know, with the current 24-hour news cycle, it's not 24 hours because it's constantly going. It's 24 hours because that's the attention span of the average news consumer. 24 hours. Right. After that, you're done. You're on to the next thing. So if they can divert the attention of the news coverage within that 24-hour period, that's that. They can be right back to business as usual. They may suffer a little fallout because, like, yeah, there was a 60 Minutes article. Yeah, this leaker went in front of the U.S. Congress. Yeah, there were a couple other news articles covering it. But for the average consumer of news and information, they will only have heard about the outage, nothing about the leaks, nothing about any of the information that was shared by the leaker. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Internal sabotage as a diversion.
Yeah, well, they say that, all publicity is good publicity, which is not, I think, true. But if you have bad publicity, it's easier to displace it with less bad, but more impactful bad publicity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just change the narrative.
Yeah, just affect a bunch of people with something that temporarily inconveniences for them for a day, and that's going to get a lot more coverage than this thing that they've been doing for years, where they are actively supporting or at least actively ignoring actual fascist rhetoric that's leading to actual material harm around the world. Yeah. In short, fuck Facebook.
Yep.
I have not been on Facebook for over a year at this point. Not of my own choice initially, but I have actively made the choice not to go back. And I'd say my life has overall been better for it. Speaking
of your hiatus from Facebook, that means that the show has been on the air for over a year.
Indeed it has.
Right. Wow.
So that's a thing.
Indeed.
I've only been around for about half of it, but my internet presence has been very, very low, to say the least, for the past little while. Kind of an unexpected move to North Dakota here, and at the same time an effort to keep my place in Canada. It's kind of limited me as to what I want to spend money on, but finally I was just like, you know what, I gotta have some online stuff going on here, if nothing else, to watch Reservation Dogs on Hulu, So.
Oh, good show.
That was well worth the $200 and some hookup fee right there. But
yeah. If any of you haven't gone and watched Reservation Dogs, it's very good.
I have not yet.
Apparently,
it's winter, so I'll finally have TV time now that it's winter. I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Apparently, there's a writer in Reservation Dogs, Waititi. I could be pronouncing it wrong.
Taika Waititi.
Yeah, he was involved with The Mandalorian and with the vampire thing. That's also kind of hilarious.
So Taika Waititi is a Maori New Zealand man who has been working with various comedy things for a while now. If any of you remember. I think, what was it? The third Thor movie, The Lost... I don't remember what it was called now. Anyways, the third Thor movie. So where he's on this planet and he's like being used as a fighter, and there's this big rock guy, right? And he talks about trying to like start a revolution, but he failed because he couldn't get enough pamphlets out to people. That was voiced by Taika Waititi. He is hilarious. He did What They Do in the Shadows, both the movie and then the TV series the TV series that spun off out of that. You mentioned something else that I cannot remember now.
Mandalorian, I understand.
Mandalorian, he's been involved in The Mandalorian. Like I said, he was involved in Marvel. He's done a lot of stuff. I'm pretty sure he was also involved in Moana. So yeah, he's been doing a lot of stuff, and like this is a really good show. For those who don't know, Reservation Dogs is talking about the essentially the exploits of 4 young teenage indigenous kids in rural Oklahoma, and kind of the shit that they go through. And I need to step away for just a moment, so I will be right back.
And I can attest that a lot of it is true to form, for sure.
Okay.
That show, I can relate.
They did their research.
They did, yeah. And speaking of writers and writing, I got my first paid gig as a writer recently, so I am pretty excited about that for sure. And with any luck, we'll be a full-time journalism/public relations student here in January. And that has been where kind of all the focus has been as far as keeping a residence in Canada, because the Canadian entities involved with distributing scholarships and bursaries like it when you live in Canada, apparently. So they don't want to send me money over here in North Dakota, even though it's only 6 miles, you know. I'd like to point that out, but
borders are stupid.
They are,
yes, they are.
Increasingly more and more stupid. Yes, for lack of a better word, definitely. But I'm managing to figure it out. I have been prodded and tested and probed and Q-tipped in my various orifices more times than I ever thought humanly possible. But that is what it takes for me to go home. I have to go and get a test, and then proof of vaccination, of course, and other things. But it's getting progressively easier, but I suspect that'll change now that, you know, the whole variant thing is happening and places are going back on lockdown, like where you are, Cory. You know, we're still kind of a black hole of denial here. So like you don't see really mask one out in public here in North Dakota, but I know Saskatchewan has taken a lot of measures.
Well, the worst part is how arbitrary it is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, you know, rule enforcement is just like if people feel like it. My uncle lives about 45 minutes from the Canadian border, and he bought 2, I believe, chopper wagons up there. And so he needed to cross the border to just go grab them quick. And the first one, he went to get it, and it was all fine. He showed them, like, his vaccine card, and he's like, I'm driving 3 miles up the road to meet this guy. I'll be coming back with a chopper wagon. And he did that, and then the next day...
Can I interrupt you for a second? What is a chopper wagon? It sounds pretty badass to me.
Well, it's really just a wagon that you chop corn silage into.
Oh.
So it's not like...
That's not doing helicopters or AK-47s.
No, nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not really chopping anything. Yeah, and so then the second day, he went to get the second wagon, and the border guard was like, you can't cross. It's blah, and like gave him a hard time, and he had to fight with him for like a half an hour, and he was like, do you want to watch me? I'm not even gonna like get out of my truck. Like, I'm just, you know, and it's like, so how do you even, like, go about your life if you have no idea if they're going to feel like enforcing or not enforcing, or, like, being jerks or not being jerks, or, like, what, you know, like, even if you know the rules, if, like, law enforcement are just going to, like, randomly decide whether or not to give you a hard time, how are you even supposed to function? You know, you can't, which is the point, I guess, of people in law enforcement being on power trips, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there has been that at border crossings for quite some time, but now they have a new kind of tool that they can, you know, use to give us a hard time at will, basically, if they so choose.
They used to tell us, well, I mean, people would tell us stories about going down across the border, and, you know, one day they would tear out everything out of your car and search it, and then leave you abandoned. So you have to clean up all your stuff on your own. And then the next day they'll just wave you by without even
They don't get out of the
it.
building.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I know the majority of the people at the borders that I cross, and I cross so enough that they're kind of familiar with me. But yeah, I know it can be arbitrary, and it can be quite annoying for sure. I came down here to look into, I packed 2 days worth of clothes. I came to look into getting my North Dakota trucking license back, or not back, but getting my trucking license here just as a way to, you know, make money without having to work too insanely hard. And anyways, I wasn't able to do that. I was, the government program that I was on in Canada, the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit, kind of pulled the plug on me. So I was like, oh shit, you know, what do I do? But came down here to look into the trucking license and the teaching license, and I managed to get the teaching license again, which is good. But the trucking thing didn't work out. So I had 2 changes of clothes. And I've been here 9 months. I've gotten more clothes, in the meantime, But yeah, it has been quite the adventure for sure. So, I'm some landlord somewhere is very happy at the, close to $10,000 I've provided them for not living in their house. But,
for not actually doing anything to the
No, yeah, zero wear and tear or damage on the house whatsoever, or use of appliances. But yeah, we'll see how things go here, and hopefully, having maintained that address will be worth it when I'm writing for a living.
Probably. Yeah, so that's kind of like the thing that I just wanted to like bring up to chat about, or it seems a little bit related. So there's this whole thing with like, I presume a similar thing is going on in Canada, but certainly in the US, the idea of the labor shortage, right? And so the idea that there's so many open jobs and, and I mean, in some places, the unemployment rate is like 1.8%, which is super low. I mean, that is like very, very low. And obviously part of that is that some of the jobs are shitty and nobody wants to do jobs that are super shitty for super shitty pay. But on the other side of that, something that I've been seeing over and over again for the last like 10 days or so is people talking about how they've put in hundreds of applications and all these jobs are open, but nobody is actually hiring for all of these open jobs. And I just wanted to know if anybody had any thoughts on that. Because, like, I know my roommate has been looking for work for, like, a year. And we had, like, a worker shortage before the pandemic. So, like, around here right now, we have most of our places are running at, like, 50 to 60% staffed. Like, most places are running at that level of staff. So there's, job openings all over the place. But, like, my roommate, she had one place drug test her and then not call her back. And that's literally in a year, the only lead that she's gotten. And she passed the drug test. I guess she never got results, but she had no reason to think she wasn't going to pass the drug test.
To the best of her knowledge, she wasn't on drugs, right?
Right. She's like, yeah, I haven't done any drugs. But like they literally just stopped taking her calls, and never called her back after they paid for her to get drug tested, right? And so I've seen a lot of stuff talking in the last week or so about how different people are saying they've put in hundreds of applications, or like people saying they've conducted an experiment where they applied to every job and here are the 50 jobs, all the jobs that said no experience necessary, right? And literally had like 3 people even call them back off that. So how are all these places desperate to hire and then they're literally not hiring anybody? And I have a little bit of anecdotal evidence in my life to see that as well. So like the question is like, why would they be doing that? Like, so I've seen a few sort of theories floated. And I'm going to forget them all now that we're recording. One of them was that in order to continue some of their pandemic relief funding, they can't eliminate the positions that they got PPP money to pay the wages of. Right. Because the whole point of PPP is that you can't cut the jobs, right? But this way they don't actually have to pay anybody to do it. If they just post the job, but then don't ever hire anybody for it, right? I have not looked into if that's actually in the rules of PPP. I mean, I know that was part of the rules that you had to continue paying those wages to people at the beginning, but I kind of thought that program ended. For my farm, I didn't get PPP money, but there was a second program where instead of free money, you could take out a low interest loan. And I did that for the farm because we had a lot of struggles, when the milk prices crashed, when all the schools closed. But that was like over a year ago that all of the requirements of that ended. So I haven't looked into if that theory is right because I literally just saw it in internet comments. So I don't know. Other people are saying that they're keeping all these positions open because it's actually more profitable for them to run at 50% staffed. But this way, they have a really good excuse for all of their shitty customer service and like delays and everything. And they can say like, oh, it's not our fault. Everybody's short-staffed, whatever.
Nobody
or maybe
wants to
this
work.
is all.
Yeah, right.
Maybe this is all
Spoiled
just
millennials, etc.
One of them was like, it's basically like they're going on a hiring strike, sort of, to try to just like wait people out so that they will take shitty hours and shitty jobs, shitty working conditions, shitty pay. Although like the pay has definitely gone up, at least what they're advertising in the job descriptions. But there's other people saying they apply to these jobs that advertise a certain amount, and then the people say once they're in the interview, yeah, it's $11 an hour. And they're like, your ad said 17. Or maybe this is all
lied
just like
to get you in there.
Maybe it's all just like completely anecdotal. I don't know. I've just been seeing a ton about it in the last 10 days. And I have to say, I've been very confused why my roommate hasn't been able to find a job in the last year. So it does kind of line up with some things I've seen. And I was just wondering if anybody else had any, like, have you read about this? Do you have any thoughts about this? Like, what is your theory about, like, why they would keep jobs open and not actually hire people for them?
I guess this is just off the top of my head too. But I think that they do like having those jobs open. They don't want to have to pay those people, and they like having the excuse and being able to say that, oh, well, we have jobs open, just we aren't getting the people that we want or whatever. We're just not getting applications, because the media narrative then is always still on the side of the businesses and never really on the side of any workers, or any discussion of like raising the minimum wage goes out the window when companies are saying, well, we're offering $15 an hour or $18 an hour, but nobody's coming to hire. Right.
And I also read an article where a company was describing their hiring problems. And then they were saying how many people they've had, people ghost them on interviews. People show up and don't show up to their first day. People show up to their first day and then they don't show up their second week of work or whatever. And one of the things that person said they did to combat that was they stopped even talking to anyone that hadn't had a steady job, that didn't have a steady job right now and had that job for at least 12 months. And I was like, that seems like it actually just like took a whole bunch of people out of your hiring pool. Yeah. So like, if people were doing something like that, I could see how, you're not finding anyone that fits your criteria because the people that are unemployed right now. That's why they're applying. Because there was a pandemic. And
keeping those unemployment levels high, makes the current administration look bad too, right? So that could be some agenda.
I mean, they're pretty low though. Like there's like the unemployment rates are like historically low almost everywhere right now. I mean, North Dakota has been historically low unemployment for since the oil boom at this point. It's been a long time. Mm-hmm. So it might not be a whole lot different for them, but a lot of states are like 2% or less, which is true. 5-6% is considered fairly normal. Yeah. But I also know I work directly with manufacturing plants at my company. I make recipes that I send to the manufacturing plants. So I'm on the phone with them every day. And I know a lot of our plants are running at 50 to 60% staffed. And on the phone with me, they say they are desperate to hire people. But I also know that when I started working at this company, the job that I applied for had been open. By the time I got the job, it had been open for almost 9 months. And me and my coworker had both, even though we both had 4-year degrees that were related and a 4-year degree wasn't even required for the job, our outsourced HR to a non-English speaking country, and they were just doing following a weird set of rules that if we didn't say the word bird on our resume, we were not included in the pool. So I have a 4-year degree in animal science, but I didn't say the word bird on my resume because the job was primarily working with chickens. Okay. So yeah, but I have a whole degree in animal science. So the whole thing I've done. And I said, done nutrition for all species of farm animals. But that's not the word bird, right? So, birds are included in that. So they had a
filtering system that would
yes.
negate any of the resumes that didn't have the word bird in it.
Right. If it didn't say the word bird or chicken or something, it was like very specific like that. And then finally, after 6 months, it wasn't even the hiring manager, because the hiring manager, frankly, didn't really give a shit. I would not see her for weeks at a time. It was someone that worked like adjacent to the field. So she's the one who ran the experiments. And they had been mothballed for over 6 months because they had no technicians to like take care of the birds. So they couldn't have any birds. So they couldn't run any experiments. So they had a multi-million-dollar building just sitting empty for this multi-trillion-dollar company that only has 2 research locations in the world. One of them was just sitting there because HR was filtering on the word bird, and the person who was in charge of the experiments finally said, no one has applied to this job. And HR was like, oh yeah, like, I mean, there's applicants, but they don't meet the requirements. And she said,
and the requirements are ridiculous.
So then she made them email her, like, she had to fight with them for weeks before they would send her just like, she's like, I don't care if there's 500 of them, just send me the stack of resumes. And she picked a few out and she was like, why didn't you tell me to interview these people? And they were like, well, they didn't say the word chicken. And she was like, what? Why would I care if they said the word chicken? They're obviously both overqualified. What? So I guess my point of this whole story is, at least at my company, which has 160,000 employees, our HR practices are astonishingly incompetent. Like,
yeah, but let's fast track the guy who has making chicken sandwiches, as his hobby on his resume. He goes onto the short list for sure.
So, like, why would, like, I have worked at a couple, like, Fortune 500 size companies and a couple, like, small companies. And they have all been astonishingly incompetent at a number of things, but hiring was definitely one of them. And just, like, how do these companies continue to function if you need 150,000 employees? We have hundreds of jobs open at any given time, and they're all being run by the same HR department that's, I can almost guarantee you, doing the exact same thing still 3 years later. They're probably keyword sorting ridiculous things out of resume. So, like, it is entirely possible that, like, there's also just a horrific level of incompetence and bad decisions involved.
Yep.
Which is one of the most depressing things about, like, humanity that I've learned in my adulthood, is, like, people are really incompetent at a lot of things.
And yet somehow they still end up in charge of other things.
I just don't understand. Like, just imagine what we could be doing if we weren't making stupid decisions constantly. I don't get it. Like, I just don't understand.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know. Like, anybody have any other thoughts on that? Like,
I don't. I mean, when I first got to Moose Jaw, which, is a lot bigger town than the one I'm in now. It's around 40,000 people or so. I was looking for work, and I know I applied for jobs that in my field that I was overqualified for, and I couldn't get any kind of a callback. And yeah, it seems like, I don't know. I thought I was more than qualified for a lot of the things I applied for, but I just didn't hear anything back. And, for the amount of people that I know that are looking for work, versus the amount of jobs on the listings, it doesn't seem proportionate at all.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then you hear from hiring managers. I read a blog called Ask a Manager, and, in the comments sections, they'll be hiring managers.
That sounds awful.
It's good advice. What's really interesting is it's been around for like 10 years now, and she was like, I guarantee you, she was like voting Republican in like 2013, and she is like super pro-union now, and like,
oh, nice.
It's really been interesting to see her evolution a little bit. Like, she had a lot of like anti-regulation, like anti-workers' rights regulation stuff that she would occasionally sort of drop in. Like, the government can't babysit everything, and the free market will handle it. And now she's like, and this is why you should unionize. Nice. Her advice to a lot of things. So Allison of Ask a Manager has moved moved to the left, I would say.
She's radicalized. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, there'll be hiring managers that'll be like, yeah, I called 25 people. 5 of them wanted to interview with me, and then 3 of them no-showed on the interview, and the 2 that did show up to the interview, I did a background check, and they had just wildly lied about half of their job experience, so I didn't hire them. And it's like, how are all the, like, people... A lot of hiring managers are talking about people ghosting interviews, which also just does not make a lot of sense to me. And of course, the narrative around that is people want unemployment, and in order to get their unemployment, they have to be job searching. So they will just like continue setting things up and then ghost them, right? But like, in my experience on unemployment, nobody was watching that closely of like what jobs. I mean, I was applying to jobs, but like nobody ever asked me about it. I was on unemployment for like 3 months, I guess. So maybe it gets harder when you're on it longer, but.
Yeah, I know in Canada, like when you're on unemployment for like if you're off of, I used to do seasonal work, so I would often be off for 4 or 5 months in the winter. And when you hit that 5-month mark, they start going like, hey, you have to start showing us the jobs you've applied to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but I'm starting work again in April. Why do I have to apply for jobs?
Yeah.
No, it's just, this is the rule. You have to show us.
But to the best of my knowledge, they don't call, follow up to the places and say, hey, did Cory actually apply?
How do you prove it? Do you just like say I applied to McDonald's, or like how do you prove it?
I had to have pieces of paper like with a signature from somebody that could hire, saying that I had been there and actually was applying for this job.
And like these hiring managers aren't like having any contact with anyone or like anything past that. But I mean, I don't know. The American system could be different.
Yeah, it quite likely is.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like the whole, like just none of this makes any sense. Like the whole thing just feels totally bizarre.
Well, I know the American unemployment system is different state by state. I've gone through unemployment in both California and Massachusetts, and both have had very different requirements for like proving that you had been, that you had been searching for a job. So,
what kind of? Can I ask what kind? Like, what did they? So you did have to provide something.
Oh, yeah. Like, every week or every 2 weeks, basically, whenever you send in your request for, that set of unemployment payment, you have to include in your filing, like, the names, phone numbers, addresses, and, like, dates when you tried to contact employers. Massachusetts went a step further, and they, like, made you go to one of their, I don't even know exactly what to call it. It was basically like a job placement training / assistance place. So basically it's an office where they have, computers to help you do job searches and look for job training and things like that. Like they make you go in for various seminars and shit. And like, I remember when I was on unemployment last, which was a few years ago, when I was doing this, by the time that they required me to go in and, physically go in and, like, do one of these things where, sit through someone talking for an hour, I had already technically found a job. I had not started it yet, right? And so I'm still trying to get paid for the time until I start the job. And so they still make me go in and do all of this shit. And I'm like, okay, but I've already found a job. I just haven't started yet. And, like, so the amount of bullshit that they make you go through for that is just astonishing sometimes.
Yeah, because you don't deserve to eat or have a roof over your head if you don't look for jobs that they approve of, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it would have been about 2011, and I know that I had to go in, like every week and like request my payment, and like I was doing a little bit of part-time work, and so I remember having to like do a little thing where I told them how much I was working and how much I was going to make from that, so they could like subtract that from my payment, but like I definitely didn't have to like list everywhere I applied for. I do distinctly remember applying for PetSmart, though, and being like, I have a 4-year degree in animal science, and then being like,
oh, God,
why would we care? Do you? And they were really concerned about how much reptile experience I had, so they really needed that.
And one of my experiences in going through the unemployment process was, a government program whereby as soon as you checked the Aboriginal Indigenous box, you were required to attend inner city agencies, that told you, this is where you get food and help of other sorts. And then various other agencies where just things were put on a very, very basic level, as though, like, I don't know if it was what it was geared toward, but it was, I don't know how to put this, like just very basic childlike stuff, like this is a resume, this is a USB drive, and I found it very kind of demeaning, right? Like,
no kidding.
And some of the things that were encouraged were like life skills programs on how to shop for groceries and stuff like this, right? And I just thought, like, I'm not, this isn't an introduction to urban life for me. This is me trying to get some help in between jobs kind of thing, right? And so my thought was, what I should really be doing for work is opening one of these agencies that, basically has a guy come in and you go, blah, 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 this is a, whatever.
This is how you shop for groceries.
Right, and you are mandated to come here by the government so that I get my paycheck. I don't have to do anything other than say, hey, welcome, Joe. This is the food bank is that way, and this is how you write a resume, right? And I just thought, like it was very kind of felt classified as less capable, I guess you could say.
Right.
Yeah, they're still working under the save the man, kill the savage ethos. Like,
I feel like it, a little bit.
Very sounds very condescending. Very
condescending.
Very racist.
Right. But, on the other hand, I could maybe see where some of these organizations probably, again, we're going back to that naivety where they thought, like, we're really going to help these people, and then, might kind of devolve over the years to where they're just kind of apathetic and they're like, mill this guy through, get our check on Friday, and go home, right? Yeah. It's a struggle for sure, No universal basic income yet, but you never know,
right? I find it unlikely.
Right. Speaking of income, many things have happened since I last spoke with you guys, but one thing that keeps popping into my head that I just find amusing and sad and very many other things is the rapper Lil Uzi Vert and his process of having a $24 million diamond surgically implanted. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this story. Surgically implanted.
I saw something about it, and I was like, how is some person I've never heard of affording a $24 million diamond? And that is the full set of thoughts I had about it.
And you want to have these stories of rags to riches, urban, I hate to use the term ghetto, but whatever, environments, to multi-million dollars. But at the same time, if you're going to surgically implant a $24 million diamond onto your forehead, so then I guess he did this to, show his millions.
He better have good bodyguards.
You're right. Well, that's just the thing. And then I think he chose to stage dive into his adoring fans. And at which point somebody went, ooh, $24 million diamond, and yoinked it from his forehead. And so he was quite upset.
And then he's bleeding all over the place.
He was quite upset about this loss for quite some time. But I mean, if you're going to go from that extreme to broke to bougie, do you really deserve my sympathy for having a fan yank the $24 million diamond from your head?
No.
I don't think so.
No, he does not deserve your sympathy in any way.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. But, and then along
decision.
After I laugh uproariously about it, it makes me wonder, how does this happen so much where you see people getting that, 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million opportunity or whatever, making it to this level, and then just everything kind of implodes on them. So it seems, as far as finances and everything else goes, it seems strange.
I mean, I've got some theories. I don't know how good they are, right. But I think it's a product of being brought up in a capitalist society that tells you that spending money is how you evaluate your own worth. Like as you increase your wealth, then you spend money and you feel better for a while, but then that goes away and you have to spend more money and you have to buy more stupid things. And of course you've got, what do you call it? Like the Keeping Up with the Joneses, but the rich person version. Right. So then you have to buy big houses and big cars and you got to be flashy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
and as a young person, I did have a little bit of money in my younger years that was set up for me to have. When I was 19 and responsible, I got this little chunk of money that my father had set up.
And you were 19 and super responsible, right?
Oh yeah, and like legal drinking age in the province I was in. So, after a night of having spent money irresponsibly and woke up feeling like crap, I did feel a lot better going out and buying, a guitar or something along those lines, right? It kind of made
at least a guitar is something you can hold in your hands.
Right. It did do the retail therapy thing, for a while there. And of course I was young and I was envisioning all the huge piles of cash I would have as I got older, so it wasn't really a problem now, right? Now parting with money to purchase something is a little harder to do. It has to be something either a really, really good value, or something that I critically need at this point.
That's still something that I have to work on a lot, is like the idea, like every time I think about my next paycheck, I'm thinking, well, I could use a new set of headphones, or I could use a new pair of shoes, or, I'm always thinking about the things that I need or want in often cases,
right,
rather than the things that I need. But I think it's a product of our environment.
For me, I spend so much energy like feeling guilty about spending money, even if I do have it, because and I've just had to but then you worry, if you drop that you'll just make really poor financial decisions if you stop worrying about it. So it's really hard to make good decisions, but also not spend so much brain power, because the problem is if you've decided that what you're gonna do is buy the headphones because that's the right decision for the money, then to spend all this emotional energy just feeling awful about it is not helpful, right, because you decided to buy the headphones, right? So to make the decision in a rational way, this is a good use of my money, this paycheck, but also to not just wrap yourself all up in it. I don't know, it kind of reminds me of if you've ever looked into
period.
Yeah, if you've ever looked into what happens to people if they went through food scarcity when they were very young, even under the age of 3, if they had food scarcity, and then as they get older, their behaviors around food will appear really, really bizarre to you if you don't know that happened to them, or if you don't know the psychology behind how that rewires your brain, right? Constantly hoarding food, eating huge amounts of food, even if they don't like it, or it just really, even if it's the kids don't even really remember it because it was when they were toddlers, right? It really impacts how they behave later in life. Or I think we've heard about stories about grandparents in the Depression who stole all the ketchup packets every time they went out to eat, right? It creates this really kind of odd compulsive behavior when you are deprived of basic human needs when you're very, very small. And I feel capitalism does that to us with money, is this constant sort of guillotine hanging over our heads that is the capitalist system, just really causes odd behaviors in people around money, like when they get some, right? It just causes people to do just totally weird things and just not be able to like engage rationally with it at all, because we're constantly in a system that's like terrifying regarding money, right? Like it's just all fucked up.
Yeah, and then you add on the marketing and socialization, social group stuff on top of it, and it's just like, yeah, you get all kinds of bizarre behaviors.
I feel
and like people get so, greedy, even if they've been well off for 20 years. They'll behave in a very greedy way because like even people that are a millionaire, if they didn't grow up that way, like they may still, feel like that guillotine is hanging over their head, right?
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's the way a lot of celebrities behave, right? Is like, because a lot of celebrities were not born wealthy. I mean, some were, but a number of like people that are in the news as celebrities were not born wealthy. So they're even more likely to do really sort of odd things with their money.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, that's fair.
I don't know.
I feel like money is just such a bizarre artificial construct right now that is so non-sustainable that, I mean, I'm not, I need it. We all do. But, I feel like building community and building other things of that nature are so much more important at this point.
Yeah.
Like, when I look at what, you go back to the $11 an hour for a job and then not being able to afford, the basics, and then looking at the amounts that some 4 or 5 people in the United States are making, and it's so far beyond anything I feel that's sustainable or that's even really relevant at this point.
Another one of my guilty pleasures is I spend no time on Reddit at all, except for the board Am I the Asshole? And like the number of posts that literally rip families apart because the family has some significant but not wild amount of money, like $50,000 to $150,000. And like, yeah, that's like really significant. Like that would be life-changing for any one of us probably, but not like billionaire money, like not crazy billionaire money. Like, they have like 50 grand and it's about kids in college. It's about, paying for one sibling's medical expenses and not the other kids, whatever. And just like just this like wealth inequality just like literally tears people apart. And the more you like read these postings, the more you're just like, I almost hope I'm so broke I can never pay for any of my kids' college education because then we'll never have a giant fight about it.
Giant fight. I hear that a lot when, as far as inheritances and stuff, family members not talking to each other, fighting over, it's kind of crazy.
A lot of them are about inheritance. A lot of them are just about like, one sibling was well off enough to afford a house and the other one wasn't, or a lot of like, the kid affords a house and they're an adult now, but like the parents, are unstable or in poverty. Their living situation is not stable. And then, and it's just always, there's a lot of stuff with medical problems, which, we could fix that if we wanted. But a lot of stuff about college and paying for college. And it's like, wow, it's almost like the biggest way to rip your family apart is to have somebody have about 50 grand more than somebody else. That appears to be the magic number to cause a giant fight.
Yeah. That's it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, lucky for me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's kind of wild because on one hand it's like, it's just sort of like you're like, why do I even need to adjudicate this? Because at this point, because you don't even like feel sorry for any of these people in some cases, and I don't know, it's just such a mess. It just creates messes, But hey, we could healthcare. We could make that. We could solve that problem. We could solve the college education cost problem. Look at all the family fights we could prevent with a decent social safety net.
Yep.
Very much so. Very much so.
Well, we've been going for just over an hour. I think that's a good time for us to call her a night. So,
sounds good to me.
You can find our content at skeptarchy.com. Our Twitter is at skeptarchypod. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/skeptarchy. And you can email us at skeptarchy@gmail.com.
And, I ran a little bit late this time because I wanted to shower up. I hadn't seen you guys in so long. I wanted to smell nice for the occasion.
You can find me over on Twitter at AncomPsycom or on Twitch at Anarchist Laboratory.
I'm on Twitter at More Cowbell. I am Dell on Earth on Facebook. And I am Dell on Earth on TikTok as well. I'm trying to get 1,000 followers so I can go live. Then I can, show you cows giving birth and other exciting things.
So cool.
Sounds fun.
And no, I have not showered since I gave birth, since I delivered a baby calf about 2 hours ago. Just FYI. I changed clothes, though, so.
That's okay.
I am Eric Ray standing on Facebook. And I completely at Eric's.
Is that your Twitter?
I believe it is. Yeah, I was hoping you had that because I check it, once a year, just to make sure it still exists. I should really get on Twitter and TikTok. I may sign up just so that I can watch Dell not giving birth, but helping cows give birth. To other cows.
I don't actually have any cows giving birth videos just yet. There are some newborn baby calves though. So.
Well, hopefully I'll be guest number 1,000 and we can go live. But
I'm only at about 240 right now.
So we got a little ways to go.
About 6 weeks.
I'll recruit. But TikTok is definitely a thing that seemed to started off for young people and has adapted to people like me now. So that's good. Thank you guys for all this, and it was really good to see you again.
And I'm at Skeptical Lefty and facebook.com/CGBrainstorm. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining me.
Great to have you back, Eric.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.